Hello, this is James Barkell.
And it is wonderful to have your company here on the centre court.
You are listening to the Coach Doctor podcast.
Strikes it beautifully and it's down the middle.
In this podcast series, we discuss all things coaching and sports science.
Beats one, beats a couple, still going.
Each episode will feature prominent coaches on the front line of their sport.
Across to Mbappe.
As well as some of the world's leading university academics who research what it takes to get the W.
All Blacks under big pressure again.
If there is an aspect of your coaching that needs some assistance, you can always count on the Coach Doctor to add life to your program.
Browning's having a terrific run. The first three to qualify. You betcha!
In this episode of the Coach Doctor podcast, I talk with former NRL head coach Matthew Elliott. Matt talks about his roles at 3 different clubs where he was the head coach and discusses the importance of communication, trust, and also dealing with adversity from the media and other pressures of professional sport. We also discuss Matt's latest venture with his business known as the Changeroom. This combines the mental and personal sides of sport and life by developing strategies to overcome adversity through illness or injury, and in effect go through the program developing change in terms of the way you think and your actions. I really like the name of the business because it associates a place where change takes place with the room where athletes also prepare mentally just before competing. Please share this episode with your colleagues and pass on the details of the Changeroom to anyone you think might gain from this program. The link to their website is in the show notes. I hope you enjoy this chat with Matt. Welcome to the show, Matt, and thanks so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, James. I need a doctor, mate, with my coaching. So a bit of evidence to that, I'd say, in the past. So, mate, looking forward to having a chat.
I'm looking forward to it as well, mate, and I think there'll be plenty to talk about both from your career in the NRL and also about what you're doing at the moment in the Changeroom as well. But I'd like to start with your first head coaching role in the NRL with the Canberra Raiders. You replaced a club legend in Mal Meninga as the head coach. What was it like coming into that environment as a new head coach, taking over from such a big personality within the club?
Oh, it's really exciting, James. I'd obviously had the opportunity to head coach in the UK prior to that, and I was pretty young. I think I was only 36, I think, at the time when I took over from Mal. I worked with Mal for a year first, so we co-coached for a year. Look, I've got you can't have anything but respect for Mal Meninga for what he's done on and off the field. I think Mal, just reflecting on Mal, I was so lucky when I first started coaching. I came out of coaching and I was at the Dragons at that time as well. And there was Brian Smith and, Rod Reddy and a guy called Max Ninnis. And I thought I knew everything about footy as a player who was, thought I understood footy until I was around those guys. So I couldn't imagine what it would have been like to transition from playing with certain guys and going in and coaching them, straight away without having that transition period. So, and when you look at when Mal's gone away and had the opportunity to work on himself, he's done some pretty extraordinary things, hasn't he?
Yeah.
The environments he's in. So it was great. And the club at that time was, I guess it was ready for a change in approach as well. A lot of things lined up.
Are you still in contact with Mal these days?
Oh, well, yeah. When I see him, we obviously have a chat and all that sort of stuff. But, Mal is, I think his biggest asset is how honest he is.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons at the rep level he's been able to get so much out of players, because he shows that vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
About being honest. So, when you see Mal, and I got the opportunity to do what you're doing here, is I interviewed him on radio and he reflected on those times and, and about what he's done since when he left the Raiders to now, in far as, personal education and accumulating knowledge and, having mentors. And if he'd had the opportunity to do that between his, finishing playing and coaching, I wouldn't have been getting the Raiders job, I can tell you that.
No, I was going to ask that. I was going to ask, what's happened to him to transform him from, I guess, that coach back in the early 2000s at the Raiders up until obviously the most successful Origin coach in history and now the Kangaroos coach?
Well, the personal qualities that he's got, he's added, he's really expanded his knowledge base. So when you're a good person and you add great knowledge to that, it's pretty powerful, right? So yeah. I think, we could complicate it and talk about, the nitty gritty of what he got into, but he understands he understands people really well,
Yeah.
and he has a way of communicating with people really well. So it's, I think Wayne Bennett's probably another really good example of how that can achieve a lot.
Yeah, definitely. So do you reckon, just a quick thing, do you think communication is one of the most important aspects there of coaching?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can say that from doing it really well and doing it not so well.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the beauty of talking to someone like me. I've done a lot of things really well. I've done a lot of things really poorly. So definitely communication it's not your knowledge.
Yeah. It's not the technical, tactical stuff. It's more about communication and being able to develop those relationships.
I don't think it's confined to sport, okay? And I know it's not, because I do a lot of work in this area. But, if you're your authentic self and you communicate well, you gain people's trust.
Yeah.
Now, what we ask young men to do on a footy field, not that easy, I can tell you. We might sit back and criticise them, but I would not want to go back out there for $1 million.
Yeah, no, I don't think I would either.
So, them trusting you and feeling safe around you allows you to get them to do things that not many people on the planet can.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that communication, and it's not how articulate you are, and it's not how it's being authentic and letting people know that you care about them. And I think that definitely, Mal does that really well, obviously, and so does Wayne Bennett. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that. So going back to your Raiders experience, mate, in 2003, the team did really, really well and almost won the minor premiership before bowing out in the finals. What made that season so successful for the Raiders, who'd been, I guess, struggling for some consistency prior to that?
Yeah, I guess the whole tenure there was reasonably successful. We overachieved a lot of the time. You can look really deep into it. Obviously, I really believe that the people there and their work ethic and buying into what we're doing was really strong. But the other really big thing that when you actually start looking into the analytics of sporting achievement is cohesion, and those combinations that you get where you don't actually need to use dialogue when you've been around the same players the whole time. And during the regular season, this happened a couple of times, and I reflect back on it, I've got to take a bit of responsibility for this, is that we used very few players that season. So the level of cohesion and continuity were massive, absolutely huge. So that that feel that they had for each other. Look, we've all been in that, whether it doesn't matter whether it be on a sporting field or in a workplace, when you're around people that you trust and you know what they're going to do in certain situations without even communicating, there's a whole lot of efficiency in it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that's happened. And then, as did a couple of times when, teams like Case had success, we had a couple of injuries right at the back end of the season. And, if you were smarter during it, you would have actually thrown a few more players in and rotated them around, rested some guys occasionally, but also expanded the amount of people that actually had that feel. So, yeah, that was probably the biggest issue. The biggest contributing factor to the success that we had during the season.
Am I correct in saying you gave Todd Carney his first grade debut?
Yeah.
What was it like managing a big personality like that in the team?
I'm still really close to Toddy, so I'm a little bit defensive around Toddy, and I tell him personally that and he'll acknowledge he's made some mistakes in life. As a 16-year-old, Toddy was a young kid out of Goulburn, and Goulburn's he was a knockabout kid, so talented. And Toddy's written a book, so I've been quoted in this, about saying that is that, Toddy wasn't a difficult person to manage. We were really lucky when he came in as a young fellow. We had guys like Jason Croker and Jason Smith who had their own, wild reputation, but they knew boundaries.
Yeah.
When the players were out in social circumstances, they only had to look at you sideways, then you knew that you were approaching the boundary and you stopped doing that. What a lot of people fail, there's a couple of things that people should know about Toddy is that his dad was a massive mentor in his life, and his dad passed just after I left the Raiders. And Toddy obviously went a little bit south after that. And the thing about Todd is that he hurt himself a lot with some of his decisions around his behaviour, but he didn't really hurt anyone else.
Definitely, yeah.
So so I am a little bit defensive around criticism of Toddy being completely wild. You never heard him striking another human or doing something that was bad towards another human. Did some things he would have preferred not to do, but Toddy is and still remains. I remain close to him, and someone that I admire the fact that what he's trying to do now is teach people from his own experiences how to make better decisions. Yeah,
he was a brilliant footballer.
Cool.
So let's fast forward a couple of years then to your time at the Panthers. Again, you came in following John Lang again, who you followed some big footsteps. He not just, but recently won the club their latest premiership in 2003. How do you, as a coach in that environment, manage the expectations of success and, I guess, the media hype as well?
Yeah, it was an interesting environment to go into, and it needed change. And I was probably better placed to make those changes than John. The reason being is that a lot of guys that won those grand final and were revered in the club, it was time for them perhaps to move and look for other opportunities. And that's not an easy thing to do when someone, when they've made such a massive contribution to the organisation. It was a bigger challenge than I thought, that's for sure. And we had to go through some adversity to make those changes. And the resistance to that was both internal and external. And I guess again, upon reflection and hindsight, it probably could have been handled in a slightly different way by myself. But ultimately, while I could have done it better, it needed to be done.
Yeah.
So it wasn't an easy environment, and I'd have to say my time there finished before Gus came, but we overlapped for a little bit.
Yeah.
And I would have liked to have had him at the beginning of my career there, because even though he's a tough taskmaster, there's a lot of functionality around what he brought to that organisation. It was probably, again, like some of those players, it was probably maybe a time that he had to move on from there and take on other challenges.
Yeah.
But I really believe that a lot of the success they've experienced now, as far as he set up an amazing infrastructure and an amazing foundation for a culture there as well.
It's interesting you say that. I'd imagine that a lot of coaches would feel they don't have all the control in a situation, whether it's a head coach and a secondary figure such as a head of football. How would you cope with the situation having someone like Gus in that position?
Well, I was with Gus, as I say, there was an overlap probably about 3 or 4 months. That'd be challenging, but it's the NRL and it's a challenging environment. And, if you're going to take on a role like a head coach of a footy club, you got to be up for those challenges.
Yeah.
And I've got no doubt, that Trent Barrett's facing challenges at the moment, but I've got no doubt that those challenges are helping the Bulldogs, progress.
Yeah.
And I got no doubt that, and I can tell you in the brief overlap period that we did have, Gus and I didn't agree on everything.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Because
that's what you need to learn and grow, isn't it?
Yeah. And, if you're in an environment where everyone's agreeing with you, you're in a bit of trouble, I can tell you.
Yeah.
Because you're not being challenged and new ideas aren't being put forward. So, I'm so pleased for the Panthers that they've progressed in the way that they have, and to see them experience success, because the fans they've got out there, and the junior base that they're nurturing, as far as the players coming through and all that sort of stuff. It's an important area for rugby league.
So you started off with some challenges at the Panthers in terms of personnel, but in 2010 you had a pretty massive season, finishing second on the ladder, and your attack stats were the best in the NRL at that point in time, scoring over 640 points in that season. What was the secret to success that year?
Yeah, I guess a little bit of a rewind of what I said about the Raiders there. We kept a lot of the same personnel on the park. And again, we lost, Michael Jennings, Petro Civoniceva, I think even Luke Lewis during the game and during our semi. So we lost some key players at the end of the season in the semi-finals that knocked us around. But we really took a skills acquisition approach. So we really, like, the pre-season was probably different than any of the players had experienced. We played a lot of, competitive games where they were cognitively challenged, not just physically challenged. And with the playing group we had, they really responded well to that.
Yeah.
That was probably, certainly one of the big reasons behind it. And then we had some key personnel that had spent some time together as well. That again gave us, Petro in particular, gave us a real foundation, as a playing group where they felt, they trusted each other, and he had no hesitation in coming to me. We trusted each other a lot if things that he believed needed to be changed. I had no hesitation going to him to say, well, we're not going to tolerate that from the playing group. So it was, there was a lot of functionality around that group for sure.
So you mentioned playing cognitive games in training. Without throwing under the bus, could you give me some examples of some of the cognitive games that you played?
Yeah, so what happens with a lot of games that you used to, you just go out there and you don't even have to think about it, right? You don't even have to communicate. So say maybe we're running north-south and with a footy, and there'll be a two-handed touch, or what you call it, you have to be touched twice.
Yep.
With two hands before it's a tackle, and it might be a two-tackle game, right? And it might be 8 on 8. So, but when I throw a tennis ball in, you're running the opposite direction. You're running east-west, and it's offside touch.
Yeah.
So again, you don't know when those balls are going to be changed.
Yeah.
And I might even change the rules during the game.
Yeah.
So you don't get a chance just to go, I'll watch what that guy does and he can learn all the rules and I'll just follow him. You've actually got to be aware the whole time. And I guess that's there's one example of a lot that we use.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah. Is that what you do know in any high level performance, whether it be in a business or whether it be an elite sport, that you're having to adapt all the time. If you don't practice those adaptations, how do you expect to get good at it? And I think that was something, we had a skills acquisition expert. I'm trying to remember what his name was, but he was from overseas, and he does a lot of work in rugby union, but there was in a lot of different other sports. So sort of tapped into his knowledge and then adapted into the rugby league environment. All the staff did a great job with it, actually.
I guess that's my background. I did a lot of research in that skill acquisition area, and it really interests me to hear what different sports are doing in that sort of space, especially having those modified games and hearing that it's going on at that elite level in the NRL. It's really cool to hear. So moving on, your time at the Panthers finished off with your resignation in 2011. As a head coach in the NRL, how does the media scrutiny affect you, affect your family, and also your mental health?
Yeah, it's a good question. There was a time I can remember at Canberra where there was a media article written that was just so wrong and personally affected me that I blew up at the media person that did it and ended up getting in a bit of a conflict. But what happens when you get in a conflict with someone in the media? They've got colleagues, right? So you tend to get attacked from the center. It's not a one thing. So I got some great advice. That's how they feed their kids. And I've been in the media myself, and so they're not paid to be right, mate. Like coaches are paid to be right. They're paid to have opinions and get people to read papers or listen or watch the media. So I was at that stage, I was probably smart enough to understand that it wasn't. I didn't really actually pay any attention to the media by that stage. With all due respects, is that was the least of my worries. At a personal level, definitely, I've got 4 daughters who just love footy. And we're so invested in every organisation that I've ever been to. So, managing that. And then I did have a health issue at the time that no one actually really knew about, that, I didn't handle well. It was an autoimmune, condition that I had that, again, sometimes you don't realize how that distances you from other people. But but it's what you sign up for when you become a head coach, is that, you're going to get that level of scrutiny. And then, that, look, even Wayne Bennett, as we talked about, is probably one of the greatest coaches we've had. He's even had to deal with stuff like that. So it's, it's inevitable. You'd prefer not to deal with it. And you'd prefer it to be about the quality of your performance rather than the quality of your relationships within an organisation. But, what I did and didn't do at that time was take responsibility for what I needed to do better, rather than going, that person did this and that person did this, and how come? So, I would have rather learnt the easy way than through suffering, but, you learn either way.
So I'll go back to your coaching again a little bit later. But firstly, I wanted to hear about the Changeroom, a company that you set up in 2016. Can you tell me a little bit about the Changeroom?
Yeah, well, it's predominantly we work in injury prevention and injury recovery. And what I learned was I started doing, when I came out of New Zealand, I started doing a lot of individual coaching with executives and leadership stuff. And, like, I can say it now because I feel far more comfortable doing it, but I got to admit to you, James, at the time I was just making it up going in. And I got an opportunity to work with a government project. So I'd done a lot of stuff with mining companies and other large corporate organisations in leadership, but I got to work with a government project in wellbeing. And we have this term we call high performance, right? And it's really a wanky term, mate, to be honest with you, because it's not high performance, it's human performance. Because what works for an athlete will work for an everyday human. But what I found, and I came to understand when I was doing this executive work, was so many organisations, because we fall in the stereotype of a footy person, right? Which is usually, you're not the smartest person in the world, but what you find out is that's incorrect. But even though I've got an academic background in sports science, and I've been to university and all that, you still buy into that stereotype subconsciously. And what I came to learn when I started working with these large organisations is that what's used in elite sport is far more cutting edge than what they use in it. We don't do quarterly reviews. We do daily reviews in the rugby league world. Previews and reviews. We're analysing, we're using cutting edge science. We're using cutting edge performance methods, wellbeing methods, because if you don't, you come last. That's the reality of it. So what I have learned through, I know that took a while for me to get there, but there's no other way of explaining it to you, James, is that what I learned was, when you start using athletes to talk to people that have injuries, and a lot of it's in the workers' compensation area, they lean in. So we do it in stadiums. So people's curiosity is spiked, right? They lean in. And then when you have someone like an Anthony Minicello or Mark Hughes start to give you information that makes sense, and they can show you the science behind it, because that's the modern language of engagement, right? And it's common sense. People then all of a sudden go, oh, and then, you get tools that you can take away that not someone else is going to make you better. We don't focus on what's wrong with you. We focus on what you can do right to make you better. What's wrong with you is your clinician's responsibility to help you with. We really believe in the integrated approach, where we're a non-clinical approach, which is scientifically validated, but we're not going to tell you what your physician needs to tell you. We're just going to tell you things that can make you better, your life better. And what we found is, initially, I hoped in 2016, I hope it worked, but now I know it works, because we've got thousands of people that have given us evidence that this stuff works.
Yeah, that's amazing. So tell me a little bit about some of the people you've helped through the Changeroom program. You talked about injury prevention and talking to people who've had injuries, are you referring mostly to sports people or injuries in the workplace?
Predominantly in the workplace, James.
Yep.
A lot of first responders, police, ambulance, corrective services people, but everyday people that, from plumbers to nurses to everyone that have suffered injury in the workplace. What you do find is some workplaces have more what they call psych injuries, than physical injuries. But if you've been a carpenter your whole life and you get a physical injury and you're out of work for 6 months, you tend to have what they call a secondary psych injury that, what am I going to do now? And you start to experience anxiety or stress related to that. So, and what we found is that what elite athletes use in those circumstances, because there's a lot of injury in the business that we work in, right?
Yeah.
When you're pushing your body to the extreme, we understand what can, along in conjunction with an integrated approach with a clinical approach. So the doctor says you've got this injury, and you've got this is to your ankle or your knee, and then from the non-clinical side of things, when you're a sports scientist or head of performance, what you can do around that injury to accelerate recovery.
Mm-hmm.
It's not complicated, is it?
No.
Well, guess what? It's not complicated for a person in the normal world.
Yeah.
If they can address their diet, address the way they breathe, address the way they move and exercise, address how they connect with other people. Because you got to, in a sporting and team environment, you got to learn how to connect with other people. Otherwise, no matter how talented you are.
Yeah.
So and we've got different people that provide some really great insight into that.
So you're not just dealing with the physical injuries, but you're also dealing with mental injuries or the mental side effects associated with those physical injuries.
Yeah, exactly. And we like to separate things out because that makes us experts, right?
Yeah.
We look at a cell, then we look inside the cell. But the truth is that your physical health isn't separate to your mental health, nor is it separate to your emotional health. They're all connected. What you think, how you feel, and what you do are all connected. You know that. That's common sense. So we don't tell people what they don't know. We tell people what they do know. We remind them, whether it's intuitively or they already know stuff, and then we give them tools, as I said, to help them have a better life. How to eat better.
Yeah.
How to actually regulate your emotional state so that you have more emotional resilience. Because you need to do that in the sporting field. I didn't realize this when I was coaching, but you do.
Yeah.
And if you don't play first grade. You don't achieve. But this applies not just to athletes. This applies to everyone.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Has what you've learned from the Changeroom helped you become a better coach?
Well, probably what we haven't discussed, James, is I'm not on the coaching staff at the Dragons anymore. I'm actually across the whole club. I'm the leadership, culture and mindset development. So the short answer to that is, it's where my true passion, and because I've done a lot of research into it, I get to work with some amazing people. I've worked with Dr. Ali Walker. She's got a PhD in human dynamics. I work with a doctor called Dr. Angela Lockwood, who's an occupational therapist. And so in the change room, for example, not all our people are sports people. We've got, people from clinical backgrounds as well. And so I've learned a lot. I've been able to put a layer on top of what I've learned through sport so that, it's not my knowledge, but it's about integrating that stuff to help the young athletes that we've got coming through, and the athletes that are the players, that are playing at our club, to understand themselves better and understand how they achieve. So it's something that has given me the opportunity and the ability to do that for sure.
So you mentioned before that you had people like Anthony Minicello and Mark Hughes, along with other former sports people, working as mentors in the change room. What makes these people such great mentors to help people overcome debilitating injuries and mental health issues?
Let's go back to the Mal Meninga conversation. So the two examples, let's use Mini and Hughes as examples. First of all, outstanding people. Outstanding people. I'll start with Mini. Mini many presents on how to eat. I don't call it diet or nutrition, but he's got a qualification in nutrition now. Now, what we sometimes forget is Anthony missed nearly 4 years of his career, came back as a 30-year-old and went on to play over 300 games. So, again, that gets people leaning in, but then it gives them common sense tools. So like a lot of the people that come into the program from a recovery side of things, Anthony understands adversity. Yeah, his version of it. He doesn't understand their version of it, but he understands his version of it. Then when you get someone like Mark Hughes, who's fighting brain cancer, when you have someone like that come in and present in a way he's funny, he's deep, he shares real stories on how to be optimistic and goal setting, it's pretty hard not to be inspired, right?
Yeah, definitely. And
he doesn't make it complicated, like Anthony doesn't make it complicated. In the nutrition can be really complicated. Go and Google it. And I'll see you in about 8 weeks' time, and you'll be, you won't even be 100th through what's on the internet. So they make it clear. They give you tools, and you sit there and go, when you hear them present, you go, oh, yeah, of course. That's what our people do. Yeah. So they give you stuff in a way, because that's the other great thing about when you're working in, say, the NRL environment, is that you've got a whole lot of people coming from diverse backgrounds. You can't share messages in a complex way, even though it's a highly complex industry. Let me tell you, what do we collect every week now? We talked last week. It's about 12 million data points every week we collect from the data that we've got sitting on the player's back. So, it's not uncomplicated, but if you make it complicated for the players, I can tell you, you're not coming first.
Yeah.
You're not making the top 8.
Yeah, I've had experience with GPS units and extracting meaningful data from all the figures it gives out. It's like, wow, this is way too much information. You have to find those little snippets of meaningful data and just focus on those. Yeah, so it's a great analogy. So, Matt, your website has some testimonial videos, and I watched some, and some are pretty confronting and emotional stories about people who have changed their lives through the Changeroom program. If I'm right, you have a 2-day workshop, and then you have a series of follow-ups with that person over the course of the year. And one of the main themes that I've heard from these people is discussing what they now have as a sense of purpose. Is this one of the main things you focus on, developing a sense of purpose when they feel they don't necessarily have one?
Yeah, and that's a really hard one, and thanks for raising that. And I get pins and needles sometimes, because we get so much feedback from people, and you can never replace the reward of hearing some of the stories that we hear. Purpose is a good way of putting it, James, but it's not as though we go to them and we're going to find a purpose for you. We don't. That's up to them to do that. What we talk about is that we're just going to, rather than focusing on what's wrong with you, and that's not a bad thing. Your clinicians need to do that.
Yeah,
we're not ignoring that. But we're going to focus on what's right with you and give you tools to make that even better. Little 1%ers, and what happens with that is I can tell you, if you're feeling better all the time, all of a sudden, your purpose, and that's what Mark Hughes talks about. We've got Nick Beveridge, who's one of our mentors. He's a Paralympian, represented Australia in the last Olympics. I think he got a silver medal in the Commonwealth Games. Again, talks about purpose and, lets people know. He uses the start where you are, use what you got, do what you can sort of approach. And so when someone who's gone through what he's gone through tells you that, you start to see that, well, if it's possible for that person, and it's possible for Mark Hughes, who there's no cure for brain cancer, to come at me with a purpose in life, and this person's changing so many people's lives, well, certainly it enables me the opportunity to have one of my own. And I think it's not so much we tell them they're going to have a purpose, they just see other people and the people that we've had who have come through adversity with a purpose, and they connect with that.
So in terms of what you do you guys work with do you spend any time working specifically with athletes or sporting organizations trying to, I guess, change culture? Or is it more to do with general population, people who have been through pretty difficult times?
So that's, again, a really good question, James. Is that predominantly we work in the workers' comp industry. We do it, but also we work in a lot of preventative areas with large organisations. New South Wales Health, Corrective Services. There's quite a few that are going to that. I've probably forgotten about 30, but anyway. But what we also have had, because when you get people like Anthony Minicello, Andrew Ryan, who we also use, Jeff Hardy, when we have people with diverse backgrounds, along with, PhD and doctors and things like that, we have had individual athletes come to us and ask for support. And I guess we've also had athletic organisations come to the Changeroom and ask, what are some of the things that they can do with their athletes? We tend to, that's probably not our biggest area of generating momentum or income. Don't like using that, but that's, I like also paying the staff. Yes, but, and a lot of the time we have people come, and if there's someone of, we let them come. We just let them come and watch the program.
And you mentioned briefly before, you've got other professionals outside of your former athletes. You've got Ali Walker, Nam Baldwin. They bring a whole range of things to the table. And I think you sort of discussed some of that already. What are some other areas, I guess, that they might impact?
Nam Baldwin's a really good one that, I'd encourage anyone listening to this to check him out. So I met Nam, I did a lot of consultation with Rip Curl.
Yeah.
So, and I'm lucky to, call Mick Fanning a good mate. And Mick, when I was at the Warriors, Nick said, you need Nam, mate. So Nam has worked with New South Wales Blues. He's worked with Richmond, worked with the Roosters. They've all gone reasonably well over recent times, yeah. So Nam is a breathing expert, but he's a far more greater range than that. But, what he gives people in our program, just simple things like how to sleep better, how to move from a state of stress to a state of calm. If you gave them nothing else, that would be great. And we're able to measure that sort of stuff because of the technologies we give them. So we've got a lot of fantastic mentors. We we've had people from a whole lot of different backgrounds that are absolutely astonishing in the impact they have on people.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to move back into your coaching now. And if we go back, rewind to 2013-14, you took on the head coaching role at the Warriors. It's obviously a little secret that the Warriors have been through some tough times over, the last 10 years. They've been through a number of coaches. Knowing what you know now from the Changeroom, do you think you could improve what you did there, knowing what you know now?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Look, there's, again, there's some things that definitely as an organisation they need to do better. But there's some things, and you can't do anything, but you can't fault doesn't do anything for you. If you take responsibility, you're allowed to make some changes. And definitely I was not coaching at my best then. As I said, I had an autoimmune disease that I was trying to keep a secret from everyone else that sort of impacted me. But I also, in my analysis, went, well, we don't have the best playing roster, so I need to be smarter than everyone else. And that is a flawed approach. And so, they're a really exciting organisation, but there's some things that are ingrained there that needed to change. And the adaptations have to be done towards them, not towards the coach. So let me say, I went there and I thought I had the right approach. And if I went through the whole detail of explain it to you, you go, well, that sounds right. But what you have to do is that you have to adapt to the organisation and the players that you're coaching and their cultural background as well. You have to adapt to them to a degree. You can't expect everyone to come that distance.
Yeah.
And I failed in that area, but also what I thought was what we're going to be is because our squad's not, instead of focusing on getting the best out of those people, don't worry about the athletes, the best out of those people. I thought if we came up with a smarter approach in human performance and a smarter approach tactically, that'll help compensate some of the areas where as far as personnel we're behind, that is That is so flawed for anyone watching. If you think that you're going to beat in the elite sport or in any elite industry, you're going to beat the opposition because you're smarter than them. I hope you're just staring down a microscope at something, because that's the only way that you're going to do. That's the only industry I know that you're going to do that in.
So how would you change that if you knew your roster wasn't as strong as a team like the Melbourne Storm or the Sydney Roosters? What could you do to make sure you perform with those top level teams?
It's a really easy word, and Melbourne Storm's a really good example. We keep saying that, we don't have the personnel and that. Well, Melbourne Storm personnel turns over a fair bit.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you look at the Melbourne Storm and you say, what's the one word, Matt, you attach to the Melbourne Storm? I would say they trust each other. And when you feel safe in an environment, and when you feel, respected, in an environment that, look, you may not be a player that's going to do astonishing things, but here's your job, do that well, and we will acknowledge that. So I think that upon reflection, if I look at the Warriors, if again, creating human connection, which, part of what we talked about in the Changeroom, we know that's the biggest impactor on longevity on the planet. Not what we eat, not how we exercise, it's how we connect with other people. That's the biggest impactor on our health.
Yeah.
So there's been scientific study done in these thing called blue zones. Go and look into it. Don't. but what they found in these areas, these 6 areas around the planet, was the biggest impact on health. Yeah, they ate pretty well, but they had a wine and some of them had a bunger. They didn't exercise. They did what they call consequential exercise. So these are areas where the highest concentration of centenarians, people over 100.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of reading on it, but more around the nutrition side of it. But yeah, go on with it's interesting hearing about the relationships or the personality aspects of it as well.
Well, eating, but you have to think about how they eat in those communities. They don't sit there like us and grab a really healthy meal and tuck it into their mouth while they run out the door or they're in front of a computer. They sit around with people. So the hormonal balance and the connection with other people and feeling safe in an environment, that's our primal instinct.
Yeah.
If we're on our own, we don't feel safe, so we're a chance of being eaten.
Yeah.
If we're around people, we feel safe. And anyway, they've done all the measurements on it. That's the biggest impactor on it. So go back to your question. I'm sorry to take the long route again, James.
No, it's good.
But, if I looked at, my time at the Warriors again, was making people feel safe, building relationships and human connections to levels that they hadn't experienced before.
Yeah.
Letting people be vulnerable, and then working on their jobs and how they could do them better. Not be smarter, but how they could do what they do better. And that makes it accessible. And that's, you go back to the Changeroom, we make stuff accessible to people. So if something that, I can do that and I can do that, rather than, God, I don't know, you start questioning yourself, it makes it easy, right?
Mm.
And that's where the purpose comes from. You believe in it. So, all those things that we spoke about just got joined together there, belief, trust, accessibility, to a purpose, that creates functional environments. And I look at what, Bellyache's done in Melbourne, and that just oozes that.
So I spoke to a few former Melbourne Storm players, and they did mention that there was a greater amount of trust because they were isolated from their family and friends in Melbourne, and therefore they formed a greater bond with their teammates who pretty much became their family. So they might not have done that so much in Sydney or in Queensland, and this led to the team becoming like a family.
Yeah, and like if you want to go into the science of it, so you sit in an environment, you feel safe. So instead of cortisol and adrenaline going, because your brain can't tell what's real or imagined.
Mm-hmm.
You're excreting oxytocin, and serotonin, and that increases recovery. That also allows other hormones and balance to happen in your body. So all the training that they're doing, they're getting greater benefit out of it. I know that sounds a bit strange, but it's the truth.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's, like you could eat the perfect food, train the perfect way, and go home and sit by yourself all the time. You're not going to get the same benefit.
Yeah.
So, that doesn't mean that eating well and training well is not right. I'm just putting that balance.
You need that holistic approach. You need all of those things to be correct.
Yeah, because you're a human first.
Yeah. No, I like it. It's some good chat. After you finished coaching at the Warriors, you had a little stint in the media with ABC Grandstand, and I've just had a couple of mates say to me, "Oh, Matt Elliott, he's one of the best commentators out there." So good job there. So you've been on both sides of the fence now in terms of a member of the media, interviewing certain coaches and players. How do you like that side of the game compared to being on the other side of it, being the coach and being the one being interviewed or being criticised?
Yeah, I worked not just on ABC. I did some stuff for NRL.com and did a little bit with Fox and all that sort of stuff. I was really lucky in all those roles, but particularly at ABC Radio because I did a lot of it. I worked with a guy, Andrew Moore, who's, I don't know, I might be biased, but he was just so professional and so easy to work with and all that sort of stuff. So that was the first thing, is that was a really fun environment to work in. And you know what, I must have been a month into it because all the media are in the one area at a lot of the grounds. And I remember I was at Sydney Football Stadium and Rabbits came into me, Rabbit Warren, and he said to me, "Oh, mate, I've been listening to you on the radio, and it's not," and I was like, "Geez," my head started to grow, But he said, "Mate, I'll just give you a little tip. You're not talking to players and coaches. You're talking to Bruce or Wendy, that live out in the suburbs. So you don't have to go as deep as you are. So give them a bit of insight, but also, bring a little bit of fun to it." Mm-hmm. And like when you get advice from someone of that, that standing, you take the advice on board. And I guess that was one of the things that I went, well, look, if I want people, because I wanted to do it well, if I want people to enjoy what I'm saying, I better start enjoying myself rather than trying to look too deep into it. So I went down that pathway of I'm going to enjoy this. I work with, I got to work with Luke Lewis and Andrew Ryan and Dean Hallertau, along with Andrew Moore, and really good people to work with. So instead of being too serious about it, I decided I want to enjoy it. And I guess that's a little different to a lot of the way media do it. Because, I even see guys with great footy IQ at the moment. There's obviously a lot of attention that's gotten through being controversial.
Yeah.
And I might even go back and do a little bit of media work this year, but being controversial, if that's what I have to do it, I'm not going to do it. I'm not disrespecting it because that's how you get attention, right?
Yeah.
Again, as I said to you before, it's not about being right. It's about getting people's attention. That's how, you sell things through the media. But yeah. So yeah, it was a good side to be on, and, occasionally getting the opportunity to go deep and meaningful with, interviewing coaches and players. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But you can't stay there. You can give people an insight, but you can't stay there. Otherwise, you may as well be speaking Spanish, right? Because if you and I get really deep into the hormonal impacts of, you smiling or frowning and all that, people are going to go, righto, let's hit the stop button. You know what I mean? So, so otherwise just call it, what is it? Instead of, Dr. Coach, call it geekathon.
Yeah, true. No. There's some good advice for me there, mate, because being new to the microphone, I probably do get into some cases where it's probably a bit of a bore-a-thon, but no, mate, you're talking a lot of sense, which is really, really good. Do you think the media is too hard on coaches in the NRL? I guess the NRL and AFL are probably two of our most prestigious sports in Australia. Do do you think when coaches are underperforming and they come really hard at them and they talk about, they'll only be there for another 2 weeks and they're on borrowed time sort of thing? Or do you think, as you said, that's the profession you're in, you just got to deal with it?
There's two answers to that. They're both yes and no. So yes, they are. Yeah. In reality, yes. But again, this is how they feed their kids. And the truth of modern life is people are engaged by controversy. I remember did a lot of written articles when I first came out of coaching as well. I'm not going to go into the organisation who. And I'd write an article with a heading on it, and then it'd come out with a different heading on it. Because the heading was, this coach is doomed. But when you read the article, is that, so-and-so is going to go through a challenging time because he's got some energy, so people aren't interested in the detail or or what I would think is interesting. People are interested in the headline, and, and the newspaper needs to get, or whoever's doing it needs to get someone to, well, what's that about? And because a lot of times the detail behind it isn't as damning as the headline, is it?
No.
So, yeah, they are. But again, if that's the environment you're working in and that's how you get attention and that's how you feed your kids, it's really the coaches that adapt. The smart coaches go, yeah, right, I've never read that before about me, or you just don't even, I can honestly say that probably in the last 6 years of my coaching, I never, ever looked at a newspaper.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's interesting to hear. And I guess, the idea of this podcast is to help, educate coaches. And if there's any coaches that want to take on, move into professional sport one day, that's an aspect that they've got to be aware of, that, there is going to be scrutiny in the press and there are going to be, fans on social media talking about them and telling them they're bloody hopeless and all that sort of stuff. So it's good to hear your reflection on some of that, and also understanding, and I like how you talked about that they've got to put food on the table, and it's what sells newspapers at the end of the day.
Yeah, and when you have that view on it, it sort of changes your aspect. Look, again, I'll just reinforce, they're not paid to be right.
Yeah.
They're paid to have an opinion.
Yeah.
And like, with all due respect, it's like I've been watching footy for 47 years. Man, I've been watching TV for the same amount of time. I don't know how TVs work.
Exactly.
Know what I mean? So they're not paid to be right.
Yeah.
So if you get all philosophical, and the only time I get peeved with the press is they can criticize the coach, they can't criticize the person. When they start going at the person, that's when that's when I get a little bit defensive. I don't. You're outside your remit there, unless the person does something inappropriate. Go nuts.
Yeah.
But that would be my only time is that if you start making personal comments rather than what they're doing professionally, and they don't deserve that. That's when, if you're a coach, you got my permission to make a phone call.
Yeah. No, good chat. So Matt, you're now back with you're not back with the Dragons, you're with the Dragons.
Yeah.
Initially, I thought you're an assistant coach, but what's your role there at the moment, and how do you enjoy that role compared to being a head coach?
I'm so blessed. The club, I had a little bit of personal adversity last year, and the club really supported me through that. So, I'm so lucky to work with people like Anthony Griffin and, Ryan Webb. That the club has been unreal to me. So I'm in a leadership, I work across the whole club, leadership, culture and mindset, but I work predominantly with the NRL team and, and with, and individually with players. So, but also across the whole organisation. I love it. It's a really, it's a really good role, and it's something that obviously because of my background or, the last 6 years of working in recovery space and preventative space, it's something that's I'm able to merge a whole lot of expertise. So it's it's fun. It's different to being a head coach. And it's different to being an assistant coach, that's for sure. Being a head coach is, I'm so blessed that I got the opportunity to do that for such a long time. Including England and here, I think it was 18 seasons. And, that's for me, I'll always be grateful to have the opportunity to impact so many people that I got to work with and, and learn so much. So, that's something that I'm lucky that I've got that experience. It certainly adds to the quality of the work I can do now, because it gives you a broader understanding of the challenges that everyone faces.
Yeah.
It's a great thing to have as certainly a bit of equipment, and something that, I went to university. I've done a lot of things in life, but nothing has taught me as much as being in a role like that. Nothing.
Yeah. Awesome. I was going to ask you about, being a head coach again, if that was something that was ever on the radar, but I think you sort of have just answered that. But
yeah, if you ask me, would I want to play again? I'd go, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably not going to happen, is it?
No, well, probably not. I would never say never, but
yeah,
good chance.
And people, I've been asked that question before, James, and, and I get where it's coming from. And look, I love being a head coach, but I love what I do now.
Yeah.
So the reality of it is that if I was a CEO right now looking for head coaches, I probably wouldn't be the first person I'd go to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can be upset about that because I can think, oh, I've got all this skill set. And no, look, I wouldn't, but there are a lot of things I can do.
Yeah.
And go back to what we talked about with the people in the change room. If they focus on what they can't do, they're going to be miserable.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
awesome.
I can do.
So I've got a question now. It's a little bit tongue in cheek. Obviously, listening, Daryl Broman's a big fan of Anthony Griffin's wife's cooking. Have you ever experienced any cooking from the Griffin family?
Oh, Daryl, the big man. No, I haven't. But
well, I think it's something you might have to look into as part of your role there. So I believe she used to bring in cakes or something for the continuous call team from time to time. So
rightio. I know Hawker's experienced some of my cooking because when he first came down, I live in the Wollongong area. I cooked him the odd feed. So
okay.
He probably went away going, oh God, that wasn't so good. So
well, maybe it's
I've been compared to a high standard.
Maybe it's a chance to have like Master Chef of the Dragons or something like that happen. Could be something new to develop a bit of a bond inside the Dragons.
I might be a touch late on that day.
Okay. And mate, the last question for you, well, fact, there's one thing that you and I both got in common, that we played for Bondi United back in the day.
Wow.
So, mate, I believe, did you grow up in Bondi or?
No.
How did you play for Bondi United?
Well, here you go. I came to Sydney to play cricket. So I was playing first grade cricket with Sydney City, a club that's no longer there. And you may even know this gentleman, God rest his soul, he passed 2 years ago, a guy called Mark Snuggs.
Know the name, don't know him.
Snuggs, he was a Bondi United legend. And he played third grade at the club I was playing at. And we ended up being good mates because we liked similar drinks. They're like orange whip drinks. They're really nice, healthy, highly nutritious drinks that we used to.
I got one here.
Yeah, similar colour. Very, very similar colour. And so Snuggs, he said, do you play footy? And I went, yeah, I love it. He said, so I'd moved to Sydney. My sister was living in Rushcutters Bay, and I moved in a little apartment, was living with her, and ended up playing cricket for Sydney City, and had a bit of success. That's what I came to Sydney to do. I didn't come to Sydney to play footy. So Yeah, so and Snugsy was at Bondi United. So
awesome. I'll make sure that this I tag Bondi United in the when I put this up on social media and stuff, and I'm sure everybody would love to hear one of the old Bondi United boys having a chat about their career in rugby league.
Go the Tarantulas.
Anyway, Matt, thank you so much for your time. It's very much appreciated. I think you've given us a heap of really good information there for coaches, for people who are potentially going through some difficult times that might have that option of looking at the change room as a way to help them get through some of those tough times. So, mate, I really, really appreciate it. And look, all the best for the future and for your role at the Dragons and the change room.
Thanks, James. Hope your ears aren't bleeding, mate.
No, they're feeling really good, mate. They've never been better. Some of the key takeaways I got from the discussion with Matt were the importance of developing human connections. While we can do the best form of training and eat the best nutrition, prepare perfectly, etc., human interaction is key into our well-being, and this translates into the performance on the field, on the track, or in the pool. I also like Matt's message about thinking about the press or the media about being opinionated only and glorifying things to sell newspapers, and in turn do not take anything that they say too personally. Like he said, he's watched TV for longer than he's coached the game, but that doesn't mean he knows how TVs work. The last point that really resonated with me was in the work that the change room are doing. Matt made the point that they do not focus on what is wrong with you, but what's right with you and what your capabilities are, and focus on those first and foremost. I train an athlete who has been through some tough times following a life-threatening accident, and I know that this is her attitude, and it now means that she's competing at the national level in her sport, and I know if she was focusing on what she could not do, then she'd be nowhere near that peak in her career that she is now. Thank you to listening for another episode of The Coach Doctor, or as Matt so eloquently put it, the Dr. Coach Podcast. Please share this episode with your colleagues and pass on the details of the change room to anyone you think might gain from the program. The link, as mentioned earlier, is in the show notes. Catch you next time on the Coach Doctor Podcast.